Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We're just going to wait for a couple of minutes just to ensure that as many people who are in the waiting room can join as well. Hi, I think someone's raised a hand on the. Is there a question before we start? Yeah, I think the person. Okay, I guess we can start. That's not an issue. So, hi everyone. My name is Nikita Wadhwa, and my colleague here, Shraddha Mehta. We're both the assistant managers of the undergraduate services at the Red Pen. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking to you guys about undergraduate admission strategies to prestigious universities across the US and the UK. A little bit of background about myself. I've been with the Red Pen now for 5 years. I have done my undergrad and my postgrad both from the US, and I've been in the education sector ever since. Shraddha, do you want to just give a quick intro and then we can start?
Yeah, thanks, Nikita. Hi, so I'm Shraddha Mehta, as Nikita said. I've been working at the Red Pen for about 10 years now. I have an undergraduate degree in law, after which I worked at a law firm for a little while before I also moved to the education consultancy space. So I did my undergraduate and postgrad from the UK. So yeah, we're going to talk to you about our experiences in undergraduate applications and how to make sure that you get into the top tier universities of your dreams.
Great. So before we actually get started, one of the main reasons we're doing this webinar is because we had an in-person event in Dubai about a month ago. We saw a lot of interest from families, a lot of questions regarding applications to some of these competitive universities. So that's one of the reasons we decided to do a webinar as well that followed that in-person event. So to start off with, who are we? Like I said, we're the assistant managers of the undergraduate team at the Red Pen. Who is the Red Pen? We started the company about 13 years ago. Was started by our current CEO, Kimberly Dixit, and Namita Mehta, who is the president. And we basically started the company with the hopes of supporting grade 11 and 12 students. Obviously, we've gone, many years have passed. We've now start working with students as young as grade 8 in order to get them application ready for competitive universities abroad. So a little bit about the Red Pen and about our stats. So we've seen in the past that I would say about 95% of our students have received offers from one of their top 3 choices. I always have to give a disclaimer over here. This basically means that the top 3 choices have to obviously be realistic. If someone has an 80% and is looking to apply to Yale, Princeton, and Harvard, they're obviously not going to get into either one of those top 3 choices. But as far as the list is balanced and is approved by the consultants, we have seen high success rates with getting into dream universities as per the students' standards. We work with students who've been admitted to 15 plus countries. So not only do we focus on US and UK, I mean, that definitely is the bread and butter of why people come to us and what we do. But we also work with regions like India, Europe, Canada, and a lot of other cities in Europe, Singapore, UAE. So we are experts with working with students who want to apply all over the world. One of our key features and one of the things we're most proud of, I would say, is that we have over the years accumulated over 65 million in scholarships. There are obviously 2 different types of scholarships. I'll get into this a little later, but there's need-based aid and merit-based aid, and we've seen a lot of success with our students receiving good amount of scholarships from universities. And we have students that have applied to over 70 plus unique majors. Now, this might seem like a very high number, but obviously most of the students that come to us, there are obviously those common majors we work with, like the econ, STEM, medicine, but there are many interdisciplinary majors that combine 2 areas, and that's why the number is as large as 70 plus. But we want to make sure that all our students are getting into the right university for the right program for themselves. So that's a little bit about the Red Pen. Before we get started about what it takes to get into competitive universities, I want to start off with a case study of one of our students. This student actually ended up applying to Harvard University. And to start off with, Harvard's historical number of applications, as you can see, since 2020 all the way up until 2024, the number of applications have been increasing, but the number of students that have been getting admitted into Harvard has more or less remained the same. So what does this mean? This means that the acceptance rate for Harvard has just been going down year on year. With the peak being 2022, I'm assuming one of the reasons this was the peak was because this was I would say the first proper year that was out of COVID. So just a lot of people ended up applying then. But in general, we've seen a steady increase in the number of applications to some of these top universities. So let's deep dive into the students. So our successful Harvard applicant wanted to major in government. A couple of the key stats of this student, the student had a 44 out of a 45 in the IB. So for his predicted, that's what he was getting. ACT score of a 35, which for many of you, I don't know if you know, but the ACT is scored out of 36 points. So he got a 35 out of a 36. And one of the key aspects of his profile was that he participated in 35 plus MUNs, and not only participated, but he actually, and I think he participated in about 50, and he actually led over 35 plus MUNs. A couple of other key features of this child's profile: he co-authored a paper, a research paper on social impact. Also during COVID, when a lot of local businesses was shutting down, he ended up creating an initiative where he actually digitalized 30 plus local businesses in order to get one of the street vendors that was shutting down. The goal was to actually get individuals access to the street vendors through digital platforms. So that was one of the initiatives that he did. And the last thing that actually demonstrated an immense amount of rigor was the fact that he took 4 core HL subjects for his IB and a bunch of other online courses. For many of you that must be knowing, when you have your HLs and SLs for IB, there's typically 3 HLs and 3 SLs. So the students specifically took 4 core HLs. If I'm not mistaken, the HLs were math, econ, physics, and global politics. So you can see all mostly being related to what he wanted to study as well. A couple of other activities that the student engaged in that showed a lot of social impact and a lot of community involvement. One was being the chief editor at the school paper. He led the fundraising club at school. He also was someone who was very into drumming and part of a rock band. So overall, the profile was very focused on getting into and applying for government, but at the same time, it was also quite holistic and also demonstrated a lot of academic rigor. So I wanted to start off with this case study and now take you through what is it that we at the Red Pen bring to the table and how can we support your child to build a competitive application from the early years. So we've sort of broken up, like I said, we start work with students as early as grade 8 and all the way up until grade 12. In grade 8, our goal is to focus on exploration of diverse academic and non-academic interests. Now, what does this mean? Basically, as many of you all know, when you apply to colleges, everything starting grade 9 counts towards applications, right? So you have your data, which counts, and your extracurricular and academic profile that counts towards college applications. So why is grade 8 and starting as early as grade 8 so important? It's because it gives you the opportunity to explore your interests so that when you get into grade 9, you're able to personalize this interest. You're able to personalize and identify 3 to 4 activities that relate to your personal story or your narrative that we're trying to build for you. Right, so that's how you spend grade 9 is identifying some of these activities. And then in grade 10, you spend a lot of time elevating those activities. So if, for example, let's go back to that student that we spoke about, if he was someone who was an avid participator of MUNs in grade 9, one of the ways he demonstrated elevation through grade 10 was by leading MUNs and by initiating clubs and organizations at school. So that's an example of showing elevation through your profile. Another example and a very common example of showing elevated interest is participating in internships, conducting some research, or participating and starting some form of a passion project, right? Grade 11 and 12 is really where we put the whole application together. So we're curating your application towards your higher education goals, and then we're executing, which means that we're actually getting to submit your applications and getting all the other elements of your application done, like your forms, your college list, your essays, scholarship applications, and all of that is sort of completed and submitted in grade 12. So this is what we at the Red Pen bring to the table, starting grade 8 all the way till grade 12. A little bit about applications around the world. What we've done is we've identified specific regions that have more complex applications. So the US is the most common and happens to be the most complex application system as well. The reason this is because it's just that they have a lot of components. There's also, I would say, a lot more expectation for having a holistic profile of engaging in multiple activities and of overall being a well-rounded student. So I would say the US and most of the new age liberal art colleges in India fall under the more complex bucket for applications. In terms of the medium regions, you have Canada, Europe, and Singapore, which tend to be slightly more straightforward when applying. And then UAE, UK, and Hong Kong have the easiest application system. So even for the UK, which is very common, it's one application that goes to 5 universities, and it's just one essay that you have to write. Digging deeper into components of the US application, and I'm going to tie a lot of this into the case study that I just took you guys through. So there are 3 main aspects and 3 main components of getting you into college. So data, voice, and talent is how sort of we like to bucket these 3 components. I always say that about 70% of your admission into university is going to be dependent on your data, right? So there's no way that you can hide not such great data by having great essays and a great extracurricular profile. Data is your college prep exam. So if you've done any AP courses, it's the strength of your curriculum. So if you're part of the international board, which is the IB or the A levels, that shows rigor. If you're not part of the international boards, and if say you're part of and you're taking and your child is doing the Indian curriculum, then are we showing academic rigor by engaging in additional AP courses? Standardized test scores. So for the US, you have your SAT and your ACT. So like you saw with the child, he had a 44 predicted and a 35 ACT. That in itself shows intense amount of academic rigor. And he also demonstrated academic rigor by, as I said, taking 4 HLs. I think he was one of the only students, part of his school, that took 4 HLs and 2 SLs. So data are just your grades, your grade 10 final board scores, your grade 12 predicted scores, and your standardized test scores. So I would say 70% of your admission is dependent on this. As far as your grades are there and your data is good, we at the Red Pen are very much able to manage these 2 other buckets, which is your voice and your talent, right? So your voice really is what we're going to get into in grade 12 through obviously your teachers writing their teacher recommendations, through your essays. So for the US specifically, you have your Common App essay. You have your supplementary essays. Supplementary essays are basically essays that each individual college requires you to write. If you're applying for the UC colleges like UCLA, Berkeley, San Diego, that's its own application form and it has its own set of essays. You have to write 4 essays out of an option. I think you're given 8 options and you have to put down 4 essays. So essays are a big part of what the voice bucket is all about. Yeah, your form, like I mentioned, you typically for the US are going to have your Common App form. You're going to have your UC form, and some students also have to work on the coalition form or applying individually to universities like MIT. And the last bit is demonstrated interest. So if colleges allow for you to sign up for an alumni interview or just demonstrating interest in a college means how are you engaging with that college? Are you following them on social media? Have you written to the admissions officers? So that really is what the voice bucket takes care of. And then your talent is your extracurricular, so your non-academic and your academic bucket. So if we go back to the case study that we saw, a lot of the students' activities were very much aligned to what he wanted to apply for and also demonstrated a holistic profile. So your talent is any extracurricular talent, any unique talent that you possess, any leadership activities that you engage in, and even your counselor recommendations, which provides the context in which you have been raised and the context in which you are engaging with all these activities. Right? There is this other bucket like financial aid, legacy status. I mean, legacy status is pretty clear, whether your parents or your sibling have also applied or attended that university. And like I mentioned, I'll get into financial aid. So there are 2 types of aid. There's need-based aid and merit-based aid. To apply for need-based aid, you have to fill out, if you're an international student, you're filling out something called the CSS profile, where you're declaring all your assets, and then the colleges review this profile, and then based on the funds that they have, they decide whether a family is needy enough. And if they are, they provide aid to that family. However, if you apply for financial aid to colleges, it can impact your admissions at colleges that are not need blind, right? Then you have merit-based aid. Your merit-based aid is very, very simple. It's based on your data. So basically based on your scores, your standardized scores, you can apply to a bunch of schools. And I think, like, if I take you back to the first slide, the $65+ million in scholarship, a lot of our students have gotten a lot of merit scholarships. And you typically will get merit scholarships from colleges that are at your target level or at your safety level. It's very hard to get scholarships from your dream colleges because they are dream colleges for not only for you, but for everybody. Yeah. What does it mean to challenge yourself? What can your child do at an early age? So number 1, taking core subjects. So math, history, English, and lab sciences would be considered your core subjects, especially when you're selecting your HLs and SLs for IB. We've many times had students that want to get into engineering, but will take business management at an HL level. Now, business management is an elective. It's also not aligned with engineering, so you'd ideally want to focus on taking core subjects. BM is great if you want to go to college and study business. But again, even if you want to study business, it's actually not BM that's required, but it's a higher level math that one should be taking. Academic elevation, like I said, through you could take AP courses, Olympiads, research papers, summer programs. These are all great ways of demonstrating academic elevation. And lastly, through extracurricular activities, you can participate in internships, leadership activities, sports, arts, music, personal projects. I typically like to bucket extracurricular activities in 3 additional areas. So I say leadership, community involvement, and academic interest are the 3 areas that all students should focus on building their profile. If you're applying for a STEM major, it's very important to build your academic interest bucket. And a reason that community involvement is so important. And again, if we go back to the case study, the student participated a lot in a lot of activities, but also demonstrated a lot of impact through his projects. And that impact element is extremely important for US colleges because they want to know how involved of a member you will be of their community. So the best way of doing that is to show that you're an involved member of your community. What kind of activities should you be looking at? Just recapping again, activities that fit with your overall story. So what does fit mean? Not everyone needs to be teaching English and math to underprivileged students. It only makes sense to have that activity if it fits in with your overall story. Activities that are done over a long period of time. So activities that show continuity of interest is extremely important. And lastly, like I mentioned, most importantly, activities that are relevant to your community are very important for US colleges. I'm going to leave it now to Shraddha to discuss a little bit about applying to colleges in the UK.
Okay, thanks, Nikita. I just want to outline that we will have time for questions and answers at the end of this, even if you have anything you want to ask about what Nikita has run you through about the US. But before we do that, I'm going to talk to you guys about the UK. So as Nikita mentioned, in the UK, there is a singular application process and platform, which is called the UCAS, which allows you to apply to 5 universities in the UK. So unless there's a private university, there are hardly a handful of exceptions to that. In total, you're only allowed to apply to 5 universities in the UK, and they all have one singular application. So one singular essay, one singular form that you have to fill out, with the exception of Oxford and Cambridge. So Oxford and Cambridge are obviously the most competitive universities in the UK. And second to that, I would say would be like an LSE or an Imperial or UCL. But of course, you guys are here to know about Oxbridge. So let me start talking to you about that in just a minute, after I first tell you about UK applications in general. So Nikita, will you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So for the UK, what is the first hurdle? So the UK applications are slightly different to the US in terms of it's not as holistic. There are different components that go into the UK application, but the first hurdle that US students need to kind of overcome is the data component, right? So UK universities have something what we call is minimum entry requirements. These minimum entry requirements mean that if you are applying for a certain course at a certain university, the university is very clearly stated that we will only admit you if you meet our minimum entry requirements. So let's say a student is applying for engineering, there will be a requirement for the IB where they'll be like, we want to see a minimum of 38 points. Sometimes that requirement is even more specific. They will say 38 points, including a 766 in your higher level subjects. And sometimes the requirements are even more specific. So like I gave you the example of engineering, it is very, very likely and very unlikely that they will not ask you for high level math and physics, right? So that is your data component. If you are not meeting these minimum entry requirements, which also includes your grade 10 scores that they're going to look at, how you've performed in the 11th grade, and most importantly, your predicted grades to meet these minimum entry points that they're asking for, then your application is automatically going to be filtered out and you're very unlikely to make it to the next stage, which is then your personal statement. Now, your personal statement is the application essay that the UK asks for, in which you talk about your interest in the major that you're applying for, as well as everything that you have done to kind of demonstrate that passion for that subject. So if you are studying or you have applied to study international relations, what subjects have you studied in school that kind of support this interest? Have you done any additional activities like a research paper? Have you done an internship at an NGO? Have you potentially even taken part in a lot of MUNs or global politics club at school to show your interest in international relations? The next part is the teacher recommendation, the counselor recommendation. Usually for the UK, it comes from one teacher who kind of outlines your overall profile in the singular letter that they write to the school. And of course, you as students will not get access to it, but it's something that your school will be writing and speaking on behalf of you in terms of what kind of student you are, why they should admit you, and what your aptitude and intellect is like. Then there's the application form, which again for the UK is pretty straightforward. There are basic questions that they ask you from personal details to a little bit about your education background. And then lastly comes fit. Now, fit is extremely important for you to know that the 5 universities that you're applying to are universities that you will eventually be happy to attend. Unlike the US and the UK, it's very hard to transfer out of the university that you're already studying in, and especially when it requires, when you look at the major or the undergraduate degree that you're applying to, if you decide to attend and in a semester or two realize that I'm not enjoying this course as much, or it's too hands-on, or it's too theoretical, you will not have an option to switch out of your course. More often than not, you're going to have to drop out of university, reapply for the next year, and start your undergraduate degree all over again. This is why fit is extremely important, which means not only the fit towards the course that you're applying for and the way that it is conducted, but it is also important to see, for example, are you okay being on a remote campus, or would you much rather be at a city university, right? So where you have access to a lot of social and extracurricular engagements, which you may not get at a remote campus, for example. A good way to show this fit or to understand if the university is the right place for you is to attend some open days, whether that is in person, if you have that opportunity, or virtually through their virtual tours that they do online. It is also a good idea to engage with the community by following them on their Instagram pages and on the YouTube pages that they have. And in particular for Oxford and Cambridge as well, this is very, very important because they have excellent YouTube profiles that I think you should follow, because a lot of professors put up a lot of their webinars and talks on the YouTube page. So now let me talk to you guys about Oxbridge. Okay, so what are they looking for in Oxbridge? One of the main things that they really look for is intellectual curiosity, right? So you are going to have, they really want to see what you have done to demonstrate your passion for your subject. How are you going to show them that you have engaged with what it is that you want to study beyond the classroom, right? So this kind of comes into place where if you look at Oxford and Cambridge's website for all their subjects, they have a recommended reading list. When you open this recommended reading list, you're going to be super overwhelmed because you're going to see that they have at least 10 or 15 books on there. That does not mean that you have to read all 10, 15 books. Our recommendation at the Red Pen is to start researching the books that interest you, the titles that interest you, and then maybe start exploring the chapters that are directly applicable to what you have already studied, or maybe perhaps you are studying a module that you want to learn more about that kind of deepens your knowledge in that subject and in that particular field, and then taking that forward. So intellectual curiosity for that reason with Oxford applicants is very, very important. They do, both universities, Oxford and Cambridge, really do value independent learning. They like to see students who take initiative and learn independently by going beyond the prescribed curriculum at school. They also like to see students who have pursued projects or activities that, again, go beyond the school curriculum as well. Another reason why this is important is, eventually I'm going to speak to you guys, but they also have an interview process. And that interview often asks you about your interest in the subject that you're applying for. Having this additional repertoire of books that you have studied and projects that you have done will really give you great talking points when it comes to the interview stage. Academic ability and potential is, of course, extremely important, but that is the minimum entry requirements that I spoke to you guys about before. Again, your ability to think critically and independently, like I said, is something that they're testing you on. So often in the interview, they are going to ask you very tricky questions, and they don't expect you to know the answer. What they're looking for, and your answer may be incorrect, is your thought process. How are you answering the question that they're asking? Are you thinking logically? Are you able to reason verbally and back up the answers that you are giving the interview panel, right? Enthusiasm for your course, again, is a little bit of repetition of what I've been saying so far. And then, of course, your data points is your strong academic record, which is extremely important as well. So as I mentioned, the entrance test often comes as part of the Oxford and Cambridge application process. So once you have submitted your UCAS form, they're going to evaluate whether you meet the minimum entry requirements, whether your personal statement, which is the essay you wrote, is strong enough to demonstrate your aptitude and interest in the subject. And then if those two points and your data points as well with your 10th grade, predicted grade, 11th grade, and letters of recommendation match, then you are going to be called for an interview. This interview happens usually in the first or second week of December, during which time they also do make you do an in-person admissions test as well. So certain subjects like for physics, they have a physics assessment test. For math, computer science, they have a test called the TMUA, which you need to be applying for and be good at assessing as well. The deadline for Oxford and Cambridge is the 15th of October. So it's one of the earliest deadlines that you're going to see within both these regions, the US and the UK as well. Okay, so this is just outlining and recapping what I just said. So as I said, Oxford and Cambridge both have a 15th October deadline. I'm just going to repeat here that you cannot apply to both Oxford and Cambridge. You're only allowed to apply to one of the two. And then the relevant tests are written down as well. Both of the Oxford and Cambridge have slightly different tests. I think some of the few tests that they're aligned on, for example, is UCAT for medicine. Actually, there's BMAT for medicine and LNAT for law. The University of Cambridge also has an additional form, which is a supplementary additional questionnaire. It's called the SAQ that needs to be filled out. And then, like I said, if you're shortlisted, you are going to be invited for an interview as well as the in-person test that's done. And then before the end of January, you will receive your decision whether you've been admitted to Oxford or Cambridge or not. Nikita, will you switch, please? This is just an example of some of the course subjects that are there, and we've just outlined the tests for you here. If you go on their website, it is very clearly stated in the entry requirements what they're looking for and the additional tests as well. So you will find all this material on their websites to do this. Yeah, so again, just repeating here, what makes you a competitive applicant? Please read. Reading is extremely important. You need to be reading beyond your school curriculum, whether it's journals, scientific articles. Also listening to podcasts is very helpful. So perhaps you don't have the time to read. Maybe you are commuting to school or to your extracurricular activity. Listen to podcasts which are related to the subject you want to study. Again, this is very important because not only are you able to input this data into your personal statement and essay, you are going to be able to use this for your Oxford or Cambridge interview. Attending seminars and lectures, like I said, any amount of knowledge that you gain, any sort of engagement that you do with the faculty are talking points that you can use later on. Depending on the subject that you are applying for, writing a research paper is something that is extremely valued in these universities because it really shows the intellectual curiosity component that we were talking about earlier. If you are applying for a course that requires a mathematical aptitude or scientific, then science competitions, Olympiads are also important to showcase your prowess and academic rigor as well. If these are not available to you, online courses are an option. It is not, Nikita did mention that applications are often read in context, but these days with everything being hybrid and virtual, to say that you have done nothing because you didn't have the opportunity is not an excuse that is easily acceptable because so many opportunities are available online. It's just about doing the right research to find them. And lastly, if you can manage to leverage your network or your parents, friends, or the local community where you live, if you are able to do an internship, please do try and pursue one if it relates to your course. what you need to know about internships, it's not about the name or place where you do the internship. What is actually more important is the quality of your internship and what your role in that internship is going to be. So what you have learned, how much of an initiative you're able to take, and what kind of impact you can make with what you're doing in that internship. So the undergraduate services at the Red Pen, again, as Nikita and I have now mentioned, what is extremely important for both the US and UK is fine-tuning your profile. So like I said, this again talks about the extracurricular activities, the academic and non-academic things, your internship as well as some sort of community engagement. One thing I didn't mention, and I think is also extremely important, especially for the UK, is because the academic rigor and minimum entry requirements are quite high. They do like to see students who have a way of coping. And what that means is that you cannot just be all about the academics and doing well in your exams. It is also about what you're doing in your free time. What are your hobbies and passions? How are you dealing with stress? Do you have an outlet? Right? If you are going to be applying to an Oxford or Cambridge, or if you're going to be applying for medicine or an intensive course at LSE or engineering at Imperial, they are going to be asking these questions, and they are going to be able to gauge whether you as a student or somebody that can actually cope with the stress of studying such an intensive course. Again, college research and selection, extremely important. You don't want to end up at a university where you start attending there and realize that you're not actually enjoying the course or the community on campus, or maybe those kind of passions that you have are not being supported there because they just don't have a students' union for it or an extracurricular club for it as well. So we help you do the research and to make sure that we have, given you a balanced college list that is the right fit for you and matches the profile that we have taken time to build. And once we have all these components in place, then we start the application process with the essays, right? We have a collaborative team approach when it comes to the essay application support, where we always have more than one person looking at your application and finalizing your essays, to ensure that we get a comprehensive overview of your application, and to ensure that there are no gaps as well. And then, of course, interview preparation is extremely important. A lot of the top tier universities in the US will be inviting you for an interview. Oxford and Cambridge invite you for an interview as well. So we start our mock interview preparation quite early on before the real interviews come about, because students usually don't have any experience in this manner, and it can be quite intimidating to either be talking to a single interviewer, or like Oxford and Cambridge often have, is a panel interview where you have more than 2 or 3 people sitting in front of you, and that can be quite overwhelming. For this, we also ensure at the Red Pen that you're never only engaging with 1 or 2 familiar faces in the interview process. We are changing those around so that every time you find somebody new, you find your own comfort and rhythm as you answer the difficult questions that they will be asking. And then finally, when all of that is in place, we have our final college selection and application. So these are, again, the deadlines. Oxford and Cambridge for the UK, medicine as well, have the earliest deadlines for all application regions, which is the 15th of October. In the US, the first application deadline that you will reach is the 1st of November, and that is the early decision and early application deadline, which happens around then, which also means that for the early decision round universities, you are going to hear back from that university about their admissions decision by mid-December. And that is actually extremely advantageous, because that means that if you do get into your top 3, one of your top 3 choices, as Nikita mentioned right at the beginning, then you no longer need to work through your Christmas break and New Year's break to do the January applications, right? So again, this is something we need to strategize and manage your schedule very well to ensure that we are meeting this deadline and choosing the right fit university for you to do your early applications. The regular applications then happen in between the 1st and 15th of January. There are a couple of universities that have slightly later deadlines after 15th of Jan till the February 1st, which includes Canadian, European deadlines, and also certain universities in the US, like the University of Michigan. And then after that are Singapore, Hong Kong deadlines, and India as well. Round 2 and 3 will come around February and March. So we do have a very successful track record when it comes to our admissions. We've had over 980 admissions in our 13 years. As a global consultancy service, over $10.25 million in scholarships. We not only help you apply to university regions all over the world, but we've also had applicants from countries all over the world. So we do deal with different curriculums, different styles of teaching, different schools. We help liaise all of that to ensure that you have the best application possible to get into a prestigious university. So these are some of our admits, and you can see Harvard, Penn, Yale, Stanford, all of these are there, all the top names that you're probably attending this webinar for, but also other universities perhaps that don't immediately speak out to you, but are extremely competitive as well, such as Georgetown, Northwestern, Boston University. Over the years and ever since COVID, applications are becoming more and more competitive. The admit rates are dropping almost to single digits for most of these universities. So yeah, I think with engaging with the Red Pen, we can help you get into some of these universities and meet your goals and future career aspirations. So if you are interested in building your profile and making sure that you have all these various components in place, we really do invite you to come and attend our summer programs fair in 2025. So it's in January 24th, 2025. We leave the slide over. We will send you guys a reminder when it happens. We do recommend that you come here. It's a one-stop shop for enrichment opportunities. So you will meet all of our partners and our team there to understand both the academic and non-academic ways to build your profile and get ready for your application.
Great. Thanks so much, Shraddha. I think we're going to end off with any questions that anyone has. We're happy to spend the next couple of minutes just doing a Q&A about anything that we spoke about. I think, Shraddha, we already have one for UK universities applying for a fine arts or architecture program. Does it help to have an additional portfolio outside of the school portfolio? If so, how do we share that with the target university?
So for the UK, when it comes to fine arts or architecture, they really clearly outline their portfolio requirements on their website itself. So they will tell you that we are looking for 3 or 4 pieces in a certain medium. We are looking for photography pieces as well. So whatever they're looking for is clearly outlined. So it doesn't necessarily help to have an additional portfolio outside of school if it is not meeting the requirements of the university. If you find that your school is not catering for those, then it does make sense to engage in an external mentor or help that can help you build this portfolio as per the requirements of the university. For this, I would say, again, it's extremely important that you start the research process early on. You don't want to be finding this out as soon as you begin 12th grade and realizing, oh my God, I'm not meeting the architecture requirements here, because with the 12th grade, whether you're studying the Indian board or the IB board or the A levels or even the American system, the APs, the workload gets quite demanding and you don't want to be balancing and overwhelmed with everything that you're doing then. Another thing to note is also for a lot of these courses that have portfolio requirements, whether it's music, art, theater, the deadlines tend to be sooner than the regular January application deadlines that will come up for the UK. For film school as well. So again, like I said, what's extremely important is starting early, and our summer programs fair is a great place to start that early. So please do come and attend. Do we also assist with applications for Australia? No, we do not assist with it because Australia works on a very unique system which has agents, and the application process is not as complicated and you are unlikely to require any additional help. It's usually quite self-explanatory and manageable.
What are some tips to consider for a student in year 9 IB? What are good things to help prepare? So to start off, I think constantly reiterating what Shraddha said, coming for the SPF in January in Dubai would actually be a great place to start if you're in grade 9, because what that's going to do is it's going to give you an opportunity to meet with service partners and to see the kind of activities that you can start engaging in. So if we're looking back at what I had discussed, right, data, voice, and talent, if you're in grade 9, a year 9, which I think might be grade 10, you're still early enough to ensure that your final grade 10 scores and your predicted scores are as high as they can be. You still have enough time to build your profile. So that's why the SPF fair would be really helpful. But I would just say focus on building that extracurricular and academic profile. And ensuring that your grades are as high as they can be. In addition, if you're close to picking your IB subjects for 11th and 12th, which is your HLs and SLs, make sure that you are taking some of the core subjects and demonstrating academic rigor through subject selection. Hi, when we write to admission officers in universities, do they ever reply? Because how else would we know if we fit there? Typically, I've seen that AOs, in fact, really do appreciate students engaging with them. Sometimes it might take some time to respond. I've also realized that just picking up the phone and calling an admissions office is possible. I know that that's not something that we're all used to doing, but yeah, I would say they're quite responsive. Even if your school has some AOs that are coming and visiting schools, please go meet with them. You will be actually surprised as to how much they remember you, and they remember unique aspects of your profile. So if there's something unique that you're doing or there's a unique talent, please share that with them as well. But yeah, in general, we've seen that they are quite responsive.
So at the Red Pen, because we are affiliated with a lot of these professional organizations, we often have AOs that are coming in and engaging with our students as well. So that is a great place to start. We typically ask our Red Pen students to have a resume ready. So if they are doing a meeting with the AO through the Red Pen, whether it's virtually or in office where our headquarters are in Mumbai, we do like that our students hand in a resume. It makes them more memorable. It gives the AOs a reference point when they're thinking about you, when they receive their application, be like, okay, I've met the student before. So it's a good way to leave an impression. So whether you do it through your school, make sure that you have something that maybe you can hand in, and you know, there is no harm ever in doing that and being proactive, right?
Do you deal with Europe university applications? Yes, we do. I would say actually that Europe is one of those regions that is definitely up and coming, especially since there's been a couple of visa issues with Canada. We've seen a lot of students are keen on applying to UK and Europe together. In Europe, I would say Netherlands is one of the most common regions that students will apply to, also because the application process is very similar to the UK, where it's one application that goes to 4 universities. And the Netherlands just has some fabulous research universities and even liberal art programs. In addition to Netherlands, I would say Switzerland, Italy are 2 other places in Europe that I've seen students typically apply to.
Spain as well. So especially
Spain
for courses like architecture, business, we do European university applications, of course, with the caveat that a lot of certain universities do have language components. So we need to make sure that you are meeting those. But other than that, yes, the full breadth of Europe, honestly, is something that we help you apply to.
Yeah.
If a student doesn't have sufficient grades for a target university, do we recommend that they join a foundation program? So we at the Red Pen would actually evaluate your entire profile and see whether that is actually the case. Often we may find that we don't necessarily need you to do a foundation program, because we can give you, 5 universities where actually your grades do meet their minimum entry requirements. And so that way you're not wasting a year in terms of time and cost to do a foundation. However, if you do have a certain level of university in mind, and say that, okay, this is my dream university, then yes, joining a foundation program is actually a great segue and a way to kind of compensate for the grades that you're missing, do well, get a taste of what university life is like, and then do your undergraduate application after that. So I think that is the last question that we have so far. Maybe we wait
Yes,
a few
and
minutes.
just to end, if anyone would like to book an appointment with us, please do use this QR code. You'll be able to book an appointment directly with either Shraddha or me. And we could sort of do a one-on-one session explaining our program to you, and also talking about your child and how we can help them get into their dream university. Will we be able to share the recording at the end of the session? Sarita, will we be doing that?
Oh, yes, we will.
Yeah, so we will be sharing the recording with everyone at the end of the session.
Yeah, Rak, it will come. Super, we're gonna wait another minute to see if there are any questions that come up. And otherwise, we thank you for joining Nikita and I here this evening. And we are hoping that we have answered all your burning questions about applying to top universities in the US and UK. Okay, I don't think any more questions are coming, Nikita.
Yeah, great. I think this is fine. Thank you so
Super.
much, everyone, for joining.
All right, thank you, and see you at the Summer Programs Fair in January.